Hello friends, welcome to another video for Cakephp. This video is for authentication or login system. So for login system in Cakephp we need a component called Auth component, and to use the Auth component by default without any further configuration we need some steps. What do you need? We need users table in the database, and the database table, users table, should have a username and password field, and the password must be encrypted. So in the last video I had a discussion that how to store data in the database. So in this video I will tell you how to encrypt the password field. And the third point, we have to load the auth component in the parent controller, app controller. And in the users controller, we have to create two functions. One is login function and the second one is the logout function. And the third, we have to create a login form, that is login.ctb file. So let's start directly. Let's check it out, our database. Then we'll encrypt the password field. Then we load the auth component and we create some login function and logout function, and then we'll create a login.ctb file. Let's get started. So this is our database users. This is the database, this is the users table, and we have in the user table, this is the structure of the user table. We have an email ID and a password. Now I do not have any data in this database table. So you see this password field must be encrypted, and the length of this field should be minimum 100 so that it can store the encrypted data. Here I do not have any users field. I am using the email and password for the encryption, for the authentication. So let's check it out how to encrypt the password first. So this is my controller. You see, this is my controller, and this is my users controller, and in this users controller I have my registration function which stores the data in the database. A very simple function I am using. If the form is submitted, then it will store the data in my database table, users table. Okay, fine. But the thing is, I want to encrypt the data. What is data? I want to encrypt the password field. So how to do that? To do that, I have to create a file, go to the model, and in this model you have a two folders, is entity and the table. Entity basically represents, I have a users.php file. You may not have this particular file. I'll tell you how to create this file. And there is a table folder. There is another file, users table.php file. So basically the entity represents the row in the table, database table, and the table this file represents the entire users table in the database. So anything you want to do, for example, if you want to encrypt the data and store the data in the database password field, so you have to write something in this particular users table. Now, how to create this table? This is called model. I want to create model for the users table. So by using Cakephp, you can create this. Go to your command prompt. So I'm going to the command prompt. Go to your project folder. So my project folder is inside the XAMPP. So this is new cake. This is my project folder. Go to the bin directory, and here you just write Cakephp and just write model. So it is saying that is the name of the model should be users, because I have a users table only. So that's why it is saying create a model called users model. So I'm just writing Cakephp model users. So it is saying already this file is there, users table.php. You say yes, I want to create this file. So it is saying entity user.php file is exist. I want to create this file again. So it is saying something fixture file, yes, say okay. Now the file, the model has been created. Now you go to your model, entity and user.php. So here you see this particular class represents the one row in your users table. Something you want to do in these fields, so you can write something here in this class. For example, what I want to do, I want to do the encryption of password. So you just write this particular function. This is a function called underscore set password. This is the password. The data coming from the registration form will go to this, is encrypted by a class called default hasher. So this is basically a class in the auth component, and hash is a function that will encrypt the password. So you write this function, and hence we are using a class called default password hasher. I have to use this class here, cake auth, and this is the class I am going to use for the encryption. So you write, this is the auth and default password hasher. So this particular function will encrypt your password. So let's see, save this file, go to the browser. Now in this table there is nothing, no data is there. Go to your user registration. I want to register one user. So for example, John at yahoo.com, and the password is John, Jon. Here. Now you see, go to your database and see the data has been encrypted. Okay, so that's it. So for encryption process, in the user entity user.php file, you have to only write this particular underscore set password and encrypt the function, encrypt the password by using default password hasher class hash function. So, and remember this, when you are using this particular class, you have to use this class, yeah, auth default password hasher. The first thing for the authentication, you need to encrypt the password first. Fine. So next is go to the app controller. Here in the app controller, you see there is a function called initialize, and this function basically loads various components. For example, here this is a component. By default, we are using request handler, request and response. This is the flash. Basically, this component is basically used for what? Messaging system, error displaying system. So what I want to do is I want to use my auth component, load component, and what component I want to use? Auth. So that's it. So this is the component I want to use for the login system. But here you see I'm not using the default parameters for the authentication, because in my database I'm using email and the password for the authentication purpose. But auth component generally uses username and password for authentication. Instead of username, I'm using email, so I have to configure my auth component. So how to do that? So you have to write simply, after loading this, you have to write some parameters here. So you can write like this. So what do you write? You write auth, then one array you write, and authentication, like this. There is a multi-dimensional array. So here again in array you have to write form like this. So you have to write like this. That means what it is saying, that means I am going to authenticate by using a login form, and the login form should have what? The fields. So you have to specify the fields here also. So I'm just copying and pasting this configuration. Okay. So as you see, I've just cut and paste some configuration. This is the standard configuration: authentication, form, fields. What are the fields I'm going to use in my authentication? Fields are email and password, and these are not necessary. Login action means when I submit this form, login form, which action will call, which controller and action I want to call. So this is not necessary, but in this way you can, configure the auth component. So remember this: load component, auth, authentication by using a form, because we can log in by HTTP login also there, but we are not using HTTP login, but we are using form login. By using a login form, we are going to log to the database or log to the application. So this is the form. What are the fields you are going to use? You have to specify these are the field names. Okay. And the login action, logout action, we can also specify logout action also. Okay. So after login, when you submit this form, it will go to the login action. So this is the second thing you have to do. Then come to the controller, users controller. In the users controller, we have to create two functions. One is the login function and the logout function. So how to write the login function? Very simple. You just write public function login, and the login function, and this is the logout function. So if you are creating a login function, you have to create a login.ctp file that is for the login form. So this is my, I've created this login form in template. Inside the template, this is my user controller, and inside this I have created a login.ctv file respective to this particular function. So this is very simple form. This is the login form, and you are creating the form here. You are ending this form here. I'm going to use two fields, the email text box, the password text box. This is the submit button. Okay, so this is the login.ctv file you have to create. Now that's it. This is a very simple login form. Okay, a very simple login form. So this is, now when you submit this form, I want to do something. What I want to do, if the form is submitted, $this, the request is post. If the request is post, that means the form is submitted. If the form is submitted, $this, I want to do authentication. You take a function variable and you just type, I am going to use the auth component. I am saying the auth component, please do the authentication by using the email and password from the login form. So auth identify. This is a function that will identify, or it will do the authentication. This is similar to your select start from users where user email is equal to $email from the form and password is equal to $password. This type of SQL query it will execute. Identify. Okay, this is something like it will execute the query and find out whether the combination of email and password is there in the database or not. So now you see, if $user, if it is authenticated, if they identified, then what it will do is it will do one thing, $this, it will do one thing, that means it's set password, it will do auth set user and $user. You have to setting the user for the application, and after authentication it will go to redirected to another new page. If the username password is correct, I want to go to some other page so that I can do some activities. So for example, return $this redirect. I want to redirect to controller, my controller, which controller? I want to redirect to the user's controller, and the action is I want to go to one index page. Okay, after a login, with successful login, it will redirect to users/index page. If it is not, then $this, I want to display. If it is not authenticated, then message flash error invalid username and password. That's it. This is my this is my very simple login function. Okay, so this is the login function. You have to create another function called public function logout, and logout is basically used when you log out, destroy all the sessions. Okay, so this is how you can create the login function. The important point here in the login function is this: auth, identify. This is validate whether the username and password are there in the table or not. If it is there, then you set this user, then you redirect. If it is not there, if it is not authenticated properly, it will display this message. Okay, so this is login function. One important point here in this controller, when you are making this auth component on, by default it will call this users controllers login function automatically. So after authentication, then only we can call any other functions. So one important function you have to write here, I have to allow, here you see I have written function called, for example, I am just writing another function. Suppose I have created the login function, the form also I have created. Here I have load the auth component. Let's go to the browser again and try to do something here. If you write login, now the login form is displaying. Okay, that's good. But here if you see, and if you want to authenticate, so I have my user is John, the password is also John. So go to this and try to find out whether it is working or not. John, I'm writing John here. This is actual password encrypted in the database, and say it is going to some, yeah, it is going to the index page, authenticated properly and going to the index page. Now the authentication is completely working. Okay, this is the auth component in the app controller. First you declare this thing. In the users controller, you just do one thing. You have to define the login function here and create a login form. So this is how you can create a login system very quickly. Now in the users controller, I want to log out. Okay, so logged out is basically to destroy the session. So auth component by default creates sessions. So in the logout, I want to destroy the session. So you write like this, $this session destroy. You can write like this. So hence you are using, and you can redirect also here. I'm deleting this logout, and I am redirecting return return $this redirect. So you can redirect like this also, direct, and then it will redirect to the login. So just copy this thing, not writing again and again, just copy this thing. So if you click on the logouts, it will go to the login. Okay, fine. Now it is okay. So the session is destroyed, is going to the login, but we are using this component. Basically the session is a component. So what you have to do is you have to write like this, $session. I'm using the session, and the next video also I'll try to cover this session part. If you log in, then I want to create some session variables. Auth component by default creates some sessions, but how to create sessions I'll tell you in the next chapter. But here I'm just completing the video by creating the logout. So $this request session. So that's it. And here you just write $. So this is similar to session start in PHP. Okay. So here I am deleting the session. So save this file, go to the browser. Now you're logged in right now. I'm just calling the logout function from the URL, logout. Now it is saying destroy is an undefined function. So yes. So this is the thing. Okay, session destroy. This is the session I have just created. Then I want to destroy the session. Go to the browser again, then log out. Then it's logged out and going to the login. So again you logged in and join and say okay. Now log out. Log out. Now it is working perfectly. Now the next point is I'm not logged into the system, but I want to access a particular function, particular page, for example registration. So what it is displaying is I'm not able to access this particular registration functions also. Okay, in my controller I have a lot of other functions also there, just like this registration, delete, profile. These are some functions. I'm not able to access these particular functions, without login. So it is displaying some error message like this, authorized access. No, you are not authorized to access this particular page. Action. So registration function or any other function I'm not able to, there's a function called add function also. No function I'm able to load. So why it's happening? When you are making this auth component on in the app controller, automatically it looks for the login function first. Everybody is okay, authenticated, then only we can access other functions in the controller. But without login, I want to access the registration page or action. So how to do that? So for that, in the controller, you might write this thing in your users controller. You can write also in the global and parent controller. Here in app controller also you can write. So what I am writing is public function, and before filter. So this is a function. This is a predefined function. This is known as callback function. Callback functions. This particular function will automatically called before any other function. Suppose I want to call this index function. Then before this particular function, it will call this particular before filter function. So it will call this function, then it will call other functions. So this particular function in this Cakephp 3.x, it takes a parameter called event. So what you have to do is, this is a particular class, so you have to include this particular class like cake, event and event. So here in this particular function, you have to tell this auth component that please allow the registration function without authentication. So you just write all this auth allow which function you want to registration. Suppose if you want to this function now, let's check it out. Go to the browser. Now you are not logged in right now. You are an anonymous user. You are trying to register. Now this function, this page is open. So without logging, you can allowing to open this particular page. So this is how you can allow. So there is another function called deny. So allow all and deny. That means deny means you cannot open or call or access this particular function or action without logged in. So if you want to write more than one action or function name, here in the allow function, you have to use an array. For example, I want to also open the index page without logged in, or some other page, profile page, some other page. If you want to, you can also specify like this. Okay, so this is how you can logged in by using very simple auth component. This is a very preliminary and primary and basic authentication system. You can also use a complicated authentication system. In the future videos, I will discuss all these ACL, access control list, and little more complicated authentication system in future videos. Please comment, give suggestions, and like and subscribe my channel so that I can produce and publish more and more videos. Thank you for watching.